Alrighty then, it is time for another video. And I actually wanted to do something more unique. That being, I wanted to try a different style of thumbnail. Um, so this is a thumbnail I made out of stick nodes. You know, the little animation app. No, I wasn't gonna make an animated what if yet. One day I might. But however, I just wanted to do something more unique with the thumbnail. So, yeah, there's the thumbnail. And the video is what if Jotaro died instead of Kakyoin? Which is an interesting take. Kind of like the whole Joseph Caesar what if, so very interesting, and we'll get to see what changes had this happened. So folks, buckle up because we're gonna be in an interesting little what if today. What would happen if Jotaro died instead of Kakyoin? Slash, what if Kakyoin survived instead of Jotaro? So, a lot of people may just say, well, the only best way to do it is have Kakyoin somehow survive how is the world attack went, like how the world attacked him, instead of turning him into a donut. Instead, he just punches him super hard in the gut, or maybe Dio just throws knives and Kakyoin uses Hierophant Green to deflect the knives. Something like that. As for how Jotaro dies, then maybe when him and Dio have that big stand clash, Dio uses the last of his power to turn Jotaro into a donut instead, or maybe Jotaro and Dio just blow up together. But I want to do something more unique. Let's say Jotaro's the one who becomes a donut and sent into the water tower. Jotaro realistically could have took that spot of Kakyoin, realistically, so we'll just say for the sake of the scenario, it happens. What happens had that happened, and how could Kakyoin win? Uh, well, most likely, there's no way Kakyoin would win, but with the team we had, Joseph and Polnareff, it seems likely if you have to use those three, you would have to really combine powers together. So, realistically, to stop Dio's time stop, you gotta time it at the right moment. That's the best way to do it. It was basically shown like that. Before Dio needs to stop time, if someone hurts him before the stop time could be complete, then Dio's stop time is undone. So, realistically, these characters could do that. Polnareff being faster than light, as it was actually confirmed. Uh, Joseph was able to keep up with Silver Chariot at that one time. Kakyoin was able to outspeed Whole Horse, who actually outspeed Polnareff beforehand, so no, Polnareff at his fastest state to be, in fact. So realistically, Kakyoin would canonically be the fastest of the three, if we're not counting young Joseph, who dodged an actual laser beam. But yeah. Ultimately, I feel like under the right circumstances, as long as they rely on their powers together, most likely the best person to get the killing blow is Joseph because of hormone-wise. If not Joseph, then maybe some way Kakyoin or Polnareff can team up to get that kill. I mean, it's possible. Realistically, maybe if the 20-meter, maybe if you want to say for the sake of the story, Dio does not have time to stop, then Kakyoin realistically would have killed him during the 20-meter Emerald Splash attack, so that's a possible way. But yeah, if you want to go with the route where Kakyoin and Jotaro, their death, like Jotaro's death is no, Kakyoin's death is Jotaro. Like, oh crap, I am doing a horrible job explaining this. Uh, Kakyoin's death is basically given to Jotaro. If you want to go with that scenario, where Jotaro is the one being sent to the water tower as a donut, then realistically, that's how I could see it go. I feel like the team would mostly need to rely on strategy to beat Dio. And if you want to go with the idea that uh, Kakyoin's injury is just not that bad, and instead Jotaro gets it worse and explodes with Dio or some crazy spot like that, then Joseph also dies because the little blood transfusion that happened means that because Jotaro is not doing it. Unless you want to say Kakyoin can do it by some way, which realistically, if you remember, Hierophant Green can enter inside people and possess them. So realistically, and then like in theory, he probably could do that. But those are just like possibilities on how that can happen. Like just take it or leave it, however you really want to see the fight go out. Uh, Most likely, in my opinion, I think it'd be more interesting if Jotaro were to die, revealing the time stop ability. And before you say anything, Jolene actually did die before the last episode of JoJo Part 6, like an episode before it, so I don't think there's nothing wrong with Jotaro dying like 2 or 3 episodes before the final fight with Dio, before Dio is defeated ultimately. So yeah, that's how Part 3 would actually change. So let's talk about how Part 4 changes. Well, if you want to go with the route where where like Jotaro dies against Dio and Joseph is ultimately not brought back, then there's no Part 4 because Kakyoin never actually is told about Josuke, I assume. Or if Speedball can find it, she could find him. But we're gonna go with the scenario where Kakyoin brings Joseph back, or Kakyoin defeats Dio somehow. Same with Joseph and Polnareff. How does the events of Morio change? Well, time stop may be a big deal, but however, a lot of the things that time stop did do, realistically, Kakyoin and Hierophant Green's long range could have replaced. I'll explain that. So, like, some of the fight, like, let's say the rat fight. Realistically, Kakyoin could probably summon a tentacle to take the attack from Josuke before he gets shot in the neck. Or, like, whenever Josuke's about to get shot, Kakyoin can just summon Hierophant Green's tentacles to like, launch out a bunch of emeralds. Realistically, that's what could have happened as a possibility. Also, since Kakyoin's not as short-tempered, it seems unlikely Josuke and Kakyoin would actually get into a fight. Aqua Necklace is another fight I would probably see there being no changes. But then again, it is possible that Kakyoin may just steamroller that fight, and the fight would end a lot faster. Red Hot Chili Pepper, Jotaro did nothing there, so realistically, I don't see Kakyoin doing much. But then again, his stand actually could use long range to actually stop Akira faster. So, yeah, actually, the more I think about it, Kakyoin would be a better Part 4 mentor than Jotaro would have been. The rat fight goes the same. I feel like all the arcs Jotaro was in, realistically, Kakyoin could have just took those roles in there. The shared attack fight with Kira, though. So if you're going with that idea of Kakyoin versus Kira, Kakyoin and Koichi versus Kira, what happens there? Well, since, like, if you remember the Tower of Grey fight, it's possible Kakyoin can just use Hierophant to enter Sheer Heart Attack and basically destroy Sheer Heart Attack from the inside out. But then again, it could probably just trigger an explosion earlier and just damage Kakyoin, so Koichi could still go through that character arc. Or maybe, but then again, another possibility is Kakyoin using it some ways. Like, for example, how Jotaro used her Platinum's beatdowns to try to take down Sheer Heart Attack, and would keep one-upping the beatdowns even to a point of stopping time. I could see Kakyoin doing the same thing, like constantly delivering the Emerald Splash, and even to a point where he resolves around the 20-meter Emerald Splash, maybe grabbing onto Sheer Heart Attack and throwing it into the 20-meter Emerald Splash attack. Something like that. But if you need a way for Kakyoin to get hurt in that fight, that was one way, having him try to enter inside Sheer Heart Attack. Another way is how Jotaro originally was able to take that injury, but instead of it using Time Stop, Kakyoin could just use Hierophant Green to pull over, like, a match or something, and then he can just light a match. Maybe grab gasoline as well. Light a circle around him, drop a match. He's rode around in a ring of fire. Bam! Giant explosion. Kakyoin can be took out of the fight. The rest of the fight could go the same. Koichi gets his little character arc. We then get Kakyoin waking up. Like, ultimately, he'll also wake up after Koichi gets turned into a donut. We get Hierophant Green versus Killer Queen. What happens? Well, I said in my whole first video, Kakyoin would win. But in this case scenario, like if Kakyoin's put in a similar position to Jotaro, the worst case scenario could happen and Kira might actually win, let alone kill Kakyoin. I feel like realistically that wouldn't happen. Like, I feel like unless Kakyoin, like if you remember little Jotaro's like one-liner to Kira, I feel like Kakyoin can instead just do the 20-meter Emerald Splash. Maybe when Kakyoin does the one-liner, it could just be to stall for time to use the 20-meter Emerald Splash. Because Kakyoin did do like one, didn't he? Like, I think he did one-liners like Jotaro. Not all the time though, so I just think he'd get one cool one-liner. He can do the Watch Comet that gets Kira to be distracted. Kakyoin can also do something else to distract Kira. Then, bam, the 20-meter Emerald Splash hits, knocking Kira down, and then we can get the little thing with Josuke and Okuyasu chasing Kira. Nothing else would change except Kakyoin would be there instead of Jotaro. And the second half of the story would not even change either. And the next change and the final change would be the final fight. Every other arc, Jotaro played little to no big role in, so yeah, Kakyoin could just take that out, like all those roles. Kakyoin versus Kira, though. Without time stop, what happens? Well, a lot of people may say, oh, Kira pulls the trigger and it's over. Realistically, nothing's stopping Kakyoin from just delivering the Emerald Splash off the bat. His stand's very fast, and it's a lot faster for Kakyoin to just throw the Emerald Splash than it would be for Jotaro to run over, stop time, only for all that to happen. I'd say it'd be a lot faster if Kakyoin were to do that. So realistically, Kira may just be defeated by Hierophant Green due to that, which is a possibility, so I would assume that's the case I would want to go with. But if you want to go with the case where Kakyoin dies in the Shard Attack fight, which isn't unlikely in my honest opinion, if Kakyoin was weakened down to that point like Jotaro was, it seems likely he'd die there. But if that's the case, the team would most likely lose. But then again, I did do a video kind of similar to this, where I said Jotaro dies to Shard Attack, and realistically, Josuke could just summon a little bullet and just shooting Kira's head or something. Or Okuyasu could just use the hand and pull Kira over into Josuke's direction so Josuke could beat him down. Those are the only ways, but like mine's from that. Part 4 doesn't really change. Maybe, well, I mean, if it does, there is also possible changes to have the part be more speedrunned, because long range, Hierophant Green, and Kakyoin's probably a better user than Jotaro, so yeah. Now let us go to the next part of the story, slash the second to last. Part 5. Now, in my opinion, I don't think Kakyoin would go to Italy. I mean, if he did, I'll talk about if he does. But in my opinion, I don't think he would. But if you're curious to wonder how Kakyoin could change Italy, though, if he does decide to go. But then again, it is also possible that he may just send someone else to go, like Josuke or Okuyasu or Rohan or something. But in my opinion, it seems likely Koichi still goes, and Kakyoin just plays Jotaro's role. But if you want to go with the scenario where Kakyoin goes to Italy, which actually does seem in character as well, we'll say Kakyoin goes to Italy because the Speedwagon Foundation and Joseph told him to go. What changes to have Kakyoin and Giorno's encounter? Well, Kakyoin is a lot... I don't know, he wouldn't trust Giorno off the bat like how Koichi did. It seems more unlikely Kakyoin would see through it as a scam and probably just stop following Giorno. He may notice that but you need to find a way for Kakyoin and Giorno for Giorno to find Kakyoin suspicious, or I'm sorry, I meant vice versa. But however, we need a way for Kakyoin to trust Giorno. It seems out of character Kakyoin would fall for a scam. So you may need to think of another way for it to happen. I'm not going to because that'd just be too much work. But ultimately maybe we'll say Giorno finds a way to steal Kakyoin's luggage without him knowing. Giorno then goes to go on a car. Kakyoin can use Hierophant Green's range, shoot an emerald, and pops a tire or something, or maybe uses a tentacle and basically hijacks the car or something. I don't know, something cool like that. And then Giorno can run away. He meets Luca. Kakyoin meets Giorno the same way Koichi did. But it seems more unlikely Kakyoin would either A, climb the tree, or B, use Hierophant Green's tentacle to pull himself up the rooftop to follow Giorno. Meaning that Kakyoin would actually get to meet Giorno during the Bruno encounter and would probably stop Bruno and Giorno's battle before it happens. Like, realistically, nothing's stopping Kakyoin from either A, delivering the 20-meter multi-splash to destroy Bruno, or B, to just wrap Bruno in Hierophant's tentacles and just deliver multi-splashes. Realistically, Kakyoin would beat Bruno. A far more experienced Kakyoin to be exact. Would he join the gang after that? A lot of people would say no, and I do agree there. But if you want to be curious and just want to say for the sake of the story, he does decide to join Passione. Maybe want to research Giorno. I know he seems out of character to join a crime organization, but maybe he hears about Diavolo and maybe he thinks Diavolo's this bad dude or something, or I don't know. Something causes Kakyoin to want to stay. Yeah, that could all happen. We get the encounter with Bucciarati's team, and Kakyoin's a very experienced stand user. And I feel like a lot of the fights that the team were in, Kakyoin's range would really play a big part in. And if I'm being honest, he'd just be a more useful version of Mista and Narancia. I mean, those stands are good, but like, Kakyoin's stand is a lot better, he's a lot more experienced, he's a lot smarter. All that stuff Kakyoin can definitely do and just outsmart the opponents. I could also see Kakyoin maybe helping Narancia and or Mista with their stands to improve on them. Maybe playing the same mentor role he did in Part 4, but in Part 5 instead. It would be pretty cool, to say the least, to see what Kakyoin can do as a mentor there. As for fight-wise, I don't really know what fight Kakyoin could be in like, the first half. The only one that comes to my mind is either him and Bucciarati or him and Mista fighting the Grateful Dead and Beach Boy fight, or maybe him being in the Man in the Mirror fight, either alongside the team or replacing Abakio or replacing Giorno. But if that's the case, then if he's replacing Giorno, it's more unlikely that Kakyoin's probably going to get killed by the virus. Or, I don't know, something like that. I think the Mirror fight with Kakyoin could be very interesting. Especially the fact that he's actually fought a stand that's kind of similar to that. But, yeah. The first half of 5 would probably go the same, and I still think Bruno would become a zombie. A lot of people may just say, well, Kakyoin would help, but that was a mission Bruno wanted to go on alone. So there's no reason Kakyoin's gonna go. So, yeah, Bucciarati's still going there, and he's unfortunately still fated to die. Now, when it comes to the rest of the story, Kakyoin would not really change the rest of the story. Personally, I just don't think Kakyoin would be in a lot of fights. Putting Kakyoin in Part 5 would be the equivalent of, like, Part 3 Joseph. Well, yes, it's cool and all, we get to see this old character from the past return and do a lot of cool stuff. He's not doing much, and he's going to be, like, in 1 or 2 fights, and that's it. He's going to get a few fights to himself. He's going to give other characters screen time. That's kind of it. At least it fleshes Kakyoin out more, to be honest. Something that I feel like that should have happened. He kind of deserved to be fleshed out more, but like, that's something that could be a good rant video on why I think Kakyoin deserved more character potential. But I actually want to start the rest of the video, please. So let's just go to that. If we want to go to the route of him preventing Abakio's death, there's the thing that Bakio was fated to die, but then again, if you could also make the argument that Jotaro was fated to die, and since Kakyoin is alive instead of Jotaro, means Kakyoin could technically prevent it. If you want to go with the idea that Rolling Stones is predicted the entirety of Part 5, meaning that you can't change their fate, then sure, by all means, you could say that. But at the same time, there's another part of me that just likes to say, well, I mean, since I mean, everything in JoJo is fated. Like, Kakyoin's death was fated to happen just as much as Bakio's death was fated. Since this is a what if based around the idea of Kakyoin not dying, but said Jotaro, you could argue that Abakio still survives. But then again, I did say Jotaro may just die in the spot of Kakyoin, so realistically that might not change. But if you want to go with the idea that that Jotaro just explodes to Dio, and maybe Kakyoin's just around, and Dio and I mean not Dio, but like Abakio means he could survive maybe if Kakyoin's there. I mean realistically, Stan could actually keep Abakio on guard. Like he could unravel Hierophant and like create a 20-meter emerald splash, but instead of it in an attacking way, his is a more defensive. Like in case if anyone were to try to go after Abakio. Sorry, I'm confusing them. They're very similar. I mean, to be honest, Anasui's just a mix of both of them. But yeah, that's how I would see it going. The 20-meter emerald splash, but more in a defense way. That could also save Abakio's life. But if we were to go as far as say Abakio never dies, then I don't think much would change. The big fight though, like the final fight, Polnareff might actually live. If Kakyoin's like, I would assume Kakyoin's probably given a lot of prep time about the time skip / time erasure. So realistically, Kakyoin may know that, well, since this guy has the ability to skip time and all that, Kakyoin may just use the 20-meter emerald splash off the bat. If Diavolo erases time, this can then lead to a big attack for himself or one of his teammates to do, which could kill Diavolo. Kakyoin's one of those characters that's more like strategy-wise. So realistically, I do think Kakyoin and Polnareff could actually work together, and Polnareff may actually get out of Part 5 not as a turtle. So, yeah. If that's not the case, then maybe Kakyoin dies for Polnareff, but, like, I doubt that. At this point, I don't really think Kakyoin's gonna die in Polnareff's place. He's now the new Jotaro of the story at this point, so, yeah. That's basically how it would change that point. And Part 5, I guess, goes the same, except there is a chance that Abakio and Narancia could survive. That's kind of debatable, but, like, maybe you could say your take on the comments. So we go to the final part, and that's Stone Ocean. You're gonna say that it might not happen because Jolene, but you could go with the idea that Kakyoin has a kid. Now, I normally go with the idea of giving him Tinmei, but in a scenario like this, you can't really use him here because Part 6 is a part around girls. So you can't use Tinmei here. So unfortunately, he's not going to be around. And we're going to pretend that he's a girl for this scenario. Because that's the only way. Or you can just have Jolene as the daughter of Kakyoin, and maybe Kakyoin finds a Joestar relative of his own, and Kakyoin just marries a Joestar relative. Like, somehow finds one. I'm not hinting that it's Holly, but it could be anyone at this point. Kakyoin marries a woman who's from Joestar descent. They end up getting married. They have a daughter. They name their daughter Jolene, and then also the female can have J-O in her name. Kakyoin divorces her, like Jotaro did, his wife in the OG. Jolene, out of spite, goes after her mother's last name over her father's last name. And you got not Jolene Kakyoin, but Jolene Joestar, or Jolene Kujo, or Jolene Joe something. Also, I do believe Stonefree would say the same. It'd be kind of cool for Jolene to kind of inherit her ancestors' stand cry while also having her dad's fighting style of using long range. And Pucci could probably go after Kakyoin instead, using the memories of Kakyoin. If you want to, maybe Tinmei could exist as this version of Jolene's older or younger or twin brother. If you want to go with that route, that would be pretty cool. Hard to say what else you can go there. I don't think Part 6 would have a happy ending, though. When it comes down to the final fight of Pucci, though, Kakyoin stand and memory, like, I actually do believe that Jolene could actually control Kakyoin's Hierophant Green, on a side note, but also, we're gonna be honest, Kakyoin taking the spot of Jotaro. What changes here? Well, Sea Moon versus Hierophant Green, Kakyoin can actually defeat it. As for why, if you remember that whole fight, the entire point of that whole thing to stop Made in Heaven was for them to find a way to get Pucci knocked down so they can kill him together. And the only reason they didn't do good with it was because they needed a long range fighter. In fact, the entire point of part 6 is basically supposed to show the pros and cons of having a character who's not long range on your team. That's how I've always felt to me. None of the part 6 characters relied on long range style. While sure you can argue that Jolene of Foo Fighters and Weather Report were versatile, they mostly relied on close range and short range. They mostly relied on short range combat than they did with long range, so you can't say that they were long range fighters. They very rarely used long range fighting styles. You could argue Foo Fighters is the only one, but yeah, sure, I guess. Kakyoin, being a very experienced stand user, probably having around like 30 to 40 years of stand experience, because I assume he's not done training with his stand on like certain characters. He knocks down Pucci off his little pedestal to heaven, and they all kill him. But if we're giving Pucci Made in Heaven, Pucci wins. And I'm not saying the whole Emporio saves the day. No, Emporio doesn't even save the day. Kakyoin's stand cannot stop time, meaning that Kakyoin is killed, Jolene is killed, Hermes and Anasui are killed, Tenma is also killed if you want to put him in there. If you want to go the route of Tenma still existing as Jolene's brother. And then Emporio's killed because there's no one left to save him. Yeah. Unless you want to go with the route that maybe Kakyoin uses his long range to spot it out, he saves Jolene at the end of the day, and then he gives her final words before he gets killed, and then maybe the story can maybe go the same. It's a possibility, but at the same time, nah. It seems more unlikely that part 6 may actually either A, end with a happy ending because they actually defeat Sea Moon because long range, B, a very depressing ending because since no one can stop time or has any counter to Made in Heaven, Pucci wins, so he basically rules the world. Or C, the story could go out the same if you find a way for Kakyoin's Hierophant Green and long range to play a role Jotaro's time stop could have played during the final fight with Pucci in Made in Heaven. And that's the video. This was probably one of the most interesting videos that came to mind. Like the Joe Bro switch around. Like the Joestar switcheroony was always, I kind of like doing these videos. Unfortunately, these are like the only two versions I can think of for when it comes to it. I mean, there could be other ones, but like, I don't know. It wouldn't work if I were to go with the other parts. Like part 1, Will and Jonathan are both dead. Unless I want to do Jonathan and Speedwagon switching places, which I don't really... I mean, it could work, but hard to say. I already did part 2 with Joseph and Caesar, but if you want to, you could go with the idea of Joseph and Stroheim. But then again, that probably wouldn't even be interesting. It's hard to say how that one would work. I technically have now done part 3 with Jotaro and Kakyoin. The fact this is the video. But then the other parts, yeah. Part 4, Josuke never really lost his Jobro. Okuyasu is still alive, and Koichi is also still alive. I mean, if you want to say what if Josuke died instead of Shingeki could work, I don't think it'd be an interesting video. Part 5, Giorno and Bruno being switched around wouldn't matter. Sticky Finger Requiem, and plus Giorno never even appears again, so what's the odds Bruno gonna appear? Okay, here are the odds. Downright impossible. And then part 6, legitimately everyone died. Unless you want me to do what if Jolene and Emporio are switched, but that's not even going to be a long video. It's going to be like a 2 to 3 minute video at best. So, yeah, and I've not even completed part 7 and 8 yet, and as of this video, chapter 1 of of JoJo Lands has finally came out, so I don't even know how that's doing, and I'm not even reading it yet. I'm still reading Still Ball Run. But yeah, I don't know if I'm sorry if I sounded salty in the ending, but whatever. That's the video. Hope you enjoyed, and see you all next time. Peace out.